Hey everyone, it's Jacob Tippett here with Production Online. I have William Garcia with us today. William, how are you?
Great, man. How are you? It's great to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you. How are you doing today? Like you're in your studio. What have you been working on?
So today I made some edits for our services. We did our rehearsals. We had a rehearsal on Tuesday and a production rehearsal Wednesday. And so today I typically take the day and do any kind of revisions of, the set. If the set length, uh, sometimes it's too long or too short, I have to edit the song or a song or two in the set to make the whole set a certain amount of time because all that matters. But uh, yeah, so I made those kind of edits and yeah, just hanging. Really been looking forward to doing this Facebook Live with y'all. So thanks
Well,
for
we're
having me.
super stoked to have you. So you do music direction at Lakewood, right?
Yes, I
Is that
do.
yeah? So what's kind of the overview of your role at the church?
So my primary job is music arrangement and organization and coordination of the band specifically. I am part of the team that put together the set list and the special music, just all around musically. It's my job to pull off with our band there, and you know music arrangements, subs for the band, and scheduling the band, and all music. Not really vocal. I don't really do vocal. We have another guy that handles and looks after all the vocal arrangements and that kind of thing. But primarily musicians that play instruments. That's what I look after.
Awesome. So let's take a look at your setup. So what do you typically run when you're prepping your sessions? And then also we can talk about what you run actually live in a set.
Yeah, sure, certainly. So are you referring to my instrument setup or my Ableton rig setup, like my stem playback or
Good question. Whichever one you want to talk through. I mean, I'm happy with either.
yeah, sure. Sure. Okay, I'll start with my instrument setup, and then I'll get to the stem session because that one's pretty unique too. So it's really cool. If you ever log on to lakewoodchurch.com, you could see every service and even on demand or live when the service is happening. It's really cool. It goes back a few weeks, I think. So, um, but you'll see we have a grand piano and it's a Yamaha C6X. We bought it in 2014. Yamaha had bought Bosendorfer back then and made all these mods to their grand pianos. Um, but what's really cool about that piano is that it's their series of silent pianos that actually transmit MIDI. So because of it being in a big arena and just controlling mic sounds and to avoid any kind of like drum or cymbal bleed into our mics, we actually don't mic the grand piano. It's MIDI'd and it's going to another uh, computer that is it's actually a Mac Mini with a solid state drive, and it's running Ivory 2. It actually has I have quite a bit of stuff. I have Logic on that computer. I have Ivory 2, and I have Omnisphere and other stuff. Um, I don't really use all the synth stuff just because you still see a grand piano. So I typically stick to grand piano sounds just because it matches the visual of it. But uh, yeah, the Ivory 2 is awesome, a great brand. I believe it's called Synthogy, and just they flew out and brought us all this stuff, and it's just been great. We've
Wow.
been using it since about 2014, and I love it. They've had me out at their booth at NAMM show uh, a few years back, and it was just so awesome. The founder of it is just a really great man, and he actually came out to one of our Night of Hopes when we do Yankee Stadium back in 2014, and he came as my guest. So it
Wow.
was awesome.
That is really
Yeah.
cool.
So
I
yeah,
love that.
yeah. So the grand piano is you see a grand piano, but you hear Ivory too, and that's what my main keys rig. As far as my Ableton or my stem rig, it's really awesome. There's a guy named Brad Duryea that he actually used to be on staff. He still does stuff with us as a contractor, but really brilliant audio engineer, and he helped us build this rig with another guy that does a lot for Ableton. He does a lot of stuff in Nashville with a lot of bands as a stem programmer, and he's just a brilliant Ableton user. But they built this rig for us that is 2 Mac towers, and they're chassis, and it's a primary stem rig and a redundant stem rig, and they run simultaneously. The coolest thing about it though is that I put it all on one rig, and he wrote code to that. It's literally one click, and it transfers all my session and all my changes with just one click to the redundant rig. And so
That's amazing.
It's amazing. I'll have to Facebook Live that sometime from the church, just so that y'all could see that. It's really amazing. No matter how big or small the change is, it literally writes the code over with that one click via terminal. He put it at the bottom of the dock, and I literally click that and it copies my entire session. Because we do make a lot of changes. Like I was telling you, what I do on Thursdays, I typically will make stem changes, or we are there's a national broadcast that's an hour long. Every service is streamed live on internet or on Lakewood's website, and then on top of that, every weekend service actually is live on SiriusXM. So because of that, our time is a really big deal. So all of our sets are timed, and when you have to deal with that, if you're running stems, if you are running stems too, where there's a fixed arrangement, then those change often for us, because I have to be sure we hit our set in the right time. But that stem rig is awesome. We'll have to take a look at it sometime.
That's awesome. And is that the same rig? So whenever you go touring, are you taking that same kind of setup, or do you take a modified version?
Yeah, so on tour we do use Ableton as well, and we do have a redundant system. On tour, same rig used to run all video content. So we did it all with laptops, and all our interface. We actually used a Black Magic. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but it's kind of like all of our. It was also our drives too, so all of the stuff was actually stored on that, and that's how we got it redundant. Still needed a switcher, to tell it when one of the rigs has gone down. When the primary rig has gone down. But yeah, we still run a redundant system, but it's only laptop instead of Mac towers.
Cool. That's awesome. That sounds really cool. I mean, I know you guys have a lot invested in those areas, and so it creates this this kind of angst that if something goes wrong, it's awesome to hear how you guys have your redundancy set up. So go ahead.
Well, I was going to say the other big thing too is that just about all of our, not all of them, but yeah, actually every single song has time code, whether they use it or not. But a lot of those key moments are time coded. So, and that does come from our stem rig, which is, a big part of my job too. In addition, that just happened over the last couple years, but go guy. So in addition to, calling cues for the band, time code is a big deal now. Just our lighting and our videos are cued through time code. So yeah,
we can be the glue in this situation, kind of pulling everything together.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to.
That's awesome. So when you prep these sets, do you have like certain things in mind? Because I know you're paying attention to how the set's going to be executed, but do you ever like prep your sessions, let's say for Easter services or any special types of services, completely different? Like, how's your approach whenever you're maybe doing a Sunday versus an event versus maybe a tour?
Yeah. So that's a really good question, because the Lakewood set list is very It's very unique. I mean, from all the other stuff that, like what you were asking me if I did any of the touring earlier, before we logged on, it's just very unique. You know, a lot of at Lakewood, transitions and flow is like a really big deal. You know, and even not just how you get into songs, that's a big deal too, but even just the dynamic of each song. Like it's almost like if you look at the whole set as one song, in the sense of like, you know, you have to have a verse and a chorus and a bridge, and or a second verse and a second chorus and then a bridge and then the last chorus. You know, you can't leave them all the same, you know, dynamic range. So, or you know, like your verse and your chorus not can't necessarily, you know, be the same energy level. So that's kind of how our set is approached. Like, you know, the first song has to have a specific amount of energy. Same with the second song, and then third song we start kind of getting into worship, and you know, the fourth song is usually a tag, not a full length song, and the fifth song is got a like landy whole set. So it's almost got to be more powerful, somehow energetic than the first song, but it's usually like, you know, 30 clicks slower. So, you know, that's like the big thing. So yeah, so setting up my sessions for like any other bands or any stuff that I do programming for is almost easier, because it's like every song is its song, and every, you know, they're all like itemized, the song in its entirety, and I don't have to worry about getting in and out of it. Whereas at Lakewood I do. You know, Lakewood a lot of times, that little tag in the middle, we like to medley it with the song before. So I'm a lot of times for Lakewood changing keys and tempos so that they can go in smoother to the song before or the song after. So there's a lot of that, a lot of key changing, or a lot of tempo changes too, or even just like tempo changes in real time. You know, not just necessarily changing meeting. I sometimes do meet in the middle for a tempo, but I also sometimes just have a gradual tempo change throughout the set. So, yeah, so that would affect how I do it. Because in Ableton, for Lakewood, I prefer to use what's called clip mode or session view, mostly because the arrangements are fixed. I'll show you here on this computer. I'm not sure if you can see that, but it's actually the mode. You've seen this mode, have you? Can you see that? Yeah, you can see it. As opposed to this mode, which is called arrangement. So I sometimes have to use this mode to do any kind of tempo changes that I would, you know. So and yeah, I pretty much have been time coding everything, so that's a big part of it. I will almost always have, I use printed clicks because it's just a little bit more fireproof. And also, one thing I ran into with Ableton, that if you have no audio content and you want to press play in clip mode, I have a hard time I have a smoother time whenever I have printed audio clicks. And because I also printed my cues in my voice and my specific clicks, it just kind of helps. It sounds like me. I don't typically like cues throughout the entire song. I only like the starts of the song. So I typically have a 4 count, and everything else I cue live. Somebody asked me today why I do that, and my answer was because otherwise I'd zone out. So I gotta be doing a lot at once in order to keep focused and, you know, keep in it. But yeah, so I start with a 4 count cue if it's in 4/4, of course, and I will do all the cueing live instead. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's super informative. I mean, I love that caveat there. There's so many different ways to approach these things. So really getting and diving into how you approach this from the level of the position you're in is really helpful. And you had mentioned something about that whenever you're preparing sessions for other people, that can be easier because there's I guess the complexity is coming when you're performing live a lot of times, and actually calling back and those types of things. Now, how do you go about actually music directing when you're working with different teams? So I would assume that sometimes you're working with a consistent team, a certain set of musicians. But let's say you're subbing in on a tour or something. Like, does that change your approach to music direction, or is everyone kind of following the same standard?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because the band that I do work with now has been together for over 10 years, like, in fact, Valentine's Day will be my 10th year in the band, of this year, 2019. I joined the band in Valentine's Day of '09. So that'll be my 10th year, but everybody else was there before me, about a year or two before I was there. So the same band has played together, and I've been calling the cues since 2012. So that's, close to 6 years of the same kind of cues. So there's definitely a dynamic that we've learned, and they've learned how I cue things, very easily. Just because that's what time does. Like, yeah. They'll know we definitely have that going for us, that chemistry that you get over years. But what I've learned with others is, if I'll try to speak the same way, or I try to speak in generic terms enough to where, if you are coming in we do have a lot of subs, and that kind of helps me when I go play with somebody else, just to understand what lingo they're used to using. Yeah, I'd say that the biggest thing is I approach all of it by service. Like, how can I just be very clear and effective, and how can I say as much as possible with the least amount of words in that time? I tend to say a lot of my cues rhythmically. Like, I prefer really rhythmic and really musical, and I also try to do it in between sung phrases, because a lot of times singers run their voice really loud in their mix. So it actually, if I say it in between phrases, it'll help them hear it too, so like, because sometimes, whenever you're going, I kind of like my mix very balanced, and even my own piano, I like to hear it as if it were in a mix. But a lot of musicians also do like to put themselves a little bit above in their mixes, which is cool. You got to be able to hear what you're playing.
Yeah.
A lot of times too, since I hear the grand piano bleed in through my ears, because it is, the acoustic and I can hear the hammer still through I feel the acoustic instrument, so I don't need a lot of it in my mix. But a lot of times when you do hear yourself louder, you can easily, not hear cues or whatever. So I just really try to be effective and clear, and the biggest thing is knowing the song really well, in and out. Even lyrically, I've learned that learning the song lyrically just really helps me a lot. Like, I mean, you wouldn't think so, but I know musicians that never know a single word of the song, but they know they memorize the music really well, and it's very impressive to me. But whenever I do know the verses, and all, a lot of times those verses have 4 different stanzas, and as much of it as I learn and I get connected to, I'm able to, direct the song, direct where the song goes, and, and just, I'm able to cue it so well because I spend time with the song. So no matter, and that works for anything connected to the song has, taken me somewhere in addition, like, yeah. where you're not just trying to, I'm not just trying to, pull the song off because it's a job, whereas I'm like, man, the song is, and this moment in this set could be very impactful to somebody. So, yeah, different, sometimes even what I've noticed along the way, and this is along the lines of what you're talking, changing out one musician can change the feel and dynamic of a band. And so a lot of times, you just kind of got to embrace that and just go along with it, and it's cool. It's a beautiful thing. I think that's what some of the best collaborations have been done whenever, you don't have everything you're used to, and which is kind of hard at Lakewood because the consistency is a big thing there. We do the same set Wednesday night, Saturday night, Sunday at 8:30 and 11 o'clock service. So, by the time the 11 o'clock service rolls around, it feels like we've been on the road, so, um, but, yeah, I'd say those are like my general, practical approaches to
That's awesome.
playing with different bands. Yeah.
That's great. So Abraham just wrote in wondering what's been your journey to actually get to the position that you currently have. I'm sure that's a long kind of journey, but like what if you can kind of recap for us some key major moments of moving into the current position that you have at Lakewood?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. So a lot of I'll back up. So the first thing I ever did was I subbed in '06, and that was I used to play on the road with a guy that was on staff at Lakewood, one of the worship leaders there, and I used to do his road dates. And he invited me to come and play back in '06. And the very next thing that I did was I actually was a music director at another church, another local church here in Houston, and that job, it was awesome, and I was so glad to do it. But because I had to work so many services, I learned that I didn't really have like a church home, kind of. So the first thing I started doing was visiting Lakewood. So I would just visit as a member. Part of what helped is that I worked always on Sundays, just like probably a lot of us do. But Lakewood has a Saturday night service, which is the same as a Sunday service, and that was really cool. That kind of became where I would go to church myself and just visit instead of working the service or anything like that. So I started visiting like since '06, and then they invited me because they knew I was a music director at another church, and I knew the band guys. Not very close, but I knew that we were friends. We were all kind of friends. They invited me to sub in for one of the tour events, and I came and subbed for the tour events. Then the second keys position in the band became open in '09, and that's actually how I joined the band. I was the youngest. I was 21 years old and joined the band, and played second keys for about 3.5 years. And in the August of 2012, there's a guy, brilliant musician. He's in the band, and his name is Larry. And he's just a brilliant musician, but he had to take about a month off for a shoulder surgery. And so during that month, I filled in on main keys and MD, and like it just, I think we were all happier. I mean, I was happier to do main keys. Turned out that he, like, for years had been like a brilliant B3 player and synthesizers. He owns actually a lot of vintage synths, and he's just one of those like all around keyboard guys that's brilliant. He actually still does all of our charting and transcriptions for the band, and he's brilliant. He went to Berkeley, so yeah, we were all happier. Like it almost felt like we all fitted better in that position. Like it was a better fit for all of us, even for him too. So we just kept it that way since 2012, and like that's really all it was. It was a guy taking off a month and me filling in, and yeah, it was pretty intimidating at the time. Like I said, I was youngest. I haven't told the band this yet, even still, but yeah, some of those guys have been playing longer than I was alive at the time. So like, what is this? What am I going to tell them? Why am I telling them how to do? But my biggest approach was serving. And I served them, and I just learned the songs, and I spent as much time as I could with them outside of work, and tried to just really dig into them. And I'd say that's a really big part of it. Probably the simplest thing I could say, but if you just are connected to the song, I mean, you will really be able to lead it anywhere. we have to. It's cool. Along those lines, there's a moment in our services that's prayer time. So we have to make that has to last 6.5 minutes because they pray for literally in the whole church. They send prayer partners out on all the aisles, and it's a really beautiful moment. But it's really hard making a 4-minute song last 6 minutes and keeping it interesting, you know. So that is like one of the most that's what I'm talking about now, about learning a song and being really well connected to it.
Wow.
It is the time that you apply that principle the most.
Yeah.
So So in 2014, I actually got asked officially by our pastor to be the music director, and it's been an awesome almost 5 years of doing that. So
that's so cool to hear. I think we're going to wrap up with one more question. I'm just curious as to if you have a favorite project or event that you've worked on, and it can be for either keys, producing, MDing, whatever world.
Yeah, man, that's very hard.
I mean, I'm sure you've worked at a bunch of incredible events and times, but
yeah.
A lot of times there's one that just sticks out. It can be even a recent one that you just felt was really impactful.
Yeah. So I now are you talking like specific event, or like what do I prefer to do as a music director most? Is that kind of like what you mean?
Let's look at maybe a specific event that you feel like was just an incredible, iconic time that you got to invest in.
Yeah. So I'd probably say I'll be generic and then I'll get to the specific, but one of the coolest things about being the music director at Lakewood is that there's been a lot of bands that come in and out. So like all the greatest worship bands for sure, like you name it, like Bethel and their team, Hillsong United and their whole band, we've backed Elevation's worship team, just, a lot of people that are just doing amazing things and, just really impacting the world of worship and the world as a whole. But what was really cool is one year, our same band had to back quite a few mainstream artists. And I think it was a Christmas, I just mean the most random of guests, but a really fun moment was when we backed up CeeLo Green and he came and sang "Mary, Did You Know?" And so I believe he grew up in church, CeeLo, and because he got emotional during singing that song. This is during the sound check part of it, and so it was just a really quiet. We kind of let him go through that and deal with that. He got really emotional and he talked about how grateful he was for Jesus and his sacrifice. And for some odd reason, I just got the urge, so I'm sitting at the piano. We just sound check it, and I just go into his song that's called. The church version is called "Forget You," and not sure if you know that song, but yeah, do you know what I'm talking about? No.
Yeah.
Look up his song "Forget You," and that lightened up the whole mood there. So that was a lot of fun.
That's amazing.
And he was
so cool.
he was like, "You guys are gonna get me struck down," and literally left after that moment. Like I kind of. Being full, but yeah, that was a really fun event. But my another one was Yankee Stadium 2014 was the first. I became the MD officially in July of 2014. This event was I became the MD officially in March of 2014. This event was in June of 2014, and it was Yankee Stadium, and it was unbelievable, like about over 40,000 people there. And yeah, it was my first MD of a ballpark because we had done those yearly since I believe 2009, but I had never gone as an MD. I've gone as second keys So having to MD that was pretty unbelievable.
That's
So,
amazing. That's super cool.
yeah.
Well, William, I appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today.
Yeah, thank you. My
And
privilege. Thanks a lot.
yeah, I hope we can do this again sometime because this is super fun.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Awesome.
Thank you, Jacob.
Well, everyone who's been streaming, thank you guys for joining us. Make sure to check out William's class in the school. You get to learn kind of the ins and outs of music direction and how he approaches arranging and executing a set. So he'll walk you through setting up the session, how to integrate different instrumentation, and how to kind of produce that into a cohesive set. So it's a really awesome series. We love to have it on productiononline.com. So be sure to check it out there if you haven't seen it yet. All right. Well, William, thanks again, and we'll chat later.
All right. Thank you, man. See you, Jacob.